Hello and welcome back to Parley, my on-the-spot responses to the prompts you folks submit. This one is from PistilWhip, hope you'll enjoy listening. It's about Symphogear's battle singing duets. I was originally going to submit this idea as a talking point for iPatch Notes May Parley, PistilWhip you say, but the word count is a bit too high, so here it is as its own submission. Symphogear, full title Senki Zesho Symphogear, literally Superb Song of the Valkyries Symphogear, has an interesting take on the your turn, my turn song dynamic in Season 3 Symphogear GX. This is a little bit similar to iPatch Notes' previous parlay, but with lyrics. The short and sweet Lies to Children synopsis of Symphogear is magical girls wielding the power of their souls, karaoke machines, to save the world from aliens and evildoers. This is actually not far from the truth. The karaoke machine analogy is brought up in character in one of the side materials. It makes sense in context, kind of. With that in mind, duets are very meaningful, as they entail harmony of not just the singer's voices and powers, but their souls as well. Look, don't click away from the parlay. This is an extremely interesting topic. Symphogear is at once a show that I can understand why would sound bad or gimmicky to someone on the outside. The pitch is battle music, battle singing. The characters in the show need to sing a song to activate and use their ability. What this does not mean is that their song turns on when there's a fight scene with them. What this does mean is they physically in universe need to continue singing the song while fighting. You know, Tsubasa uses a sword and Chris uses guns, but like Hibiki punches people. So if you've tried boxing with someone while singing idle music, okay, so I've made my point. When they get hit, you hear the voice actress like interrupt her singing and grunt as though getting hit. Ugh, from an enemy punching them as they continue trying to sing the chorus of the song. Their voices will crack or shift or briefly stop being a singing voice and then go back as the voice actress tries to act getting like beaten up while doing their singing. It's very interesting from a voice acting perspective at the very least. But the show is designed around this premise. I am going to bring up musicals as something I don't like from an artistic perspective. Not that I specifically dislike or begrudge anyone enjoying something that is a musical, but musicals are a very limiting art form, in my opinion. I think there are some stories that exist that happen to be told more effectively if they were a musical, but for the most part, portraying a meaningful amount of a story's plot through song would almost always be worse than not doing that, in my humble opinion. The story would need to be designed for that to be the case. And I feel that in many musicals it isn't, and people just like music, and that's fine, but I don't think that that makes it like better. That's not a good pitch for going up to see this musical. If you just want to, I'm not arguing that it's bad that there's music in it, but it's not like adding something explicitly in many cases, in my opinion. There are certainly exceptions. And I think that the difference here is that the entire show is designed around this premise. For example, there are lots of fights and environments that restrict your ability to sing or make it like difficult to sing, or where the group can sing together. There is the ridiculously funny to me concept in universe of phonic gain. This is the idea that if there is a lot of harmonizing music between Symphogear users, that like makes you stronger, and so you can have a sort of backup choir of your squad mates, making it easier for you to be powerful and maintain your abilities even while like beating the crap out of somebody and trying to sing an idle song. There are a lot of fights that are on water, just mysteriously for no reason at all on water, because you know if you were to fall in the water while you're, you know, having to actively sing something, well, what would happen? In my own D&D games, I often employ water as a hazard because if you're underwater, you know what you can't do easily? The verbal component for spells. If you need to say something to cast the spell, usually I rule you can say it, but I mean put your head underwater really quick and then try to speak. Like you almost immediately begin drowning. So like you can still cast something with a verbal component, but like good luck next round, you know? And I believe, I can't remember exactly, that is the kind of thing that would happen in the show, I guess is what I'm getting at. there being restrictions on sound or how the characters are able to sing, and them being physically interrupted from singing, or the momentum of the song getting like cut off, the literal theme song of a character getting cut short as they get hit by a powerful blow or something like that. It can be really fun. It's a show and a narrative that is designed to have lots of music in it. And I think for me, as someone who, to be blunt, pretty much just hates musicals as an entire concept, even I think many of them are objectively, there's a good reason for there to be music in this, but I just don't enjoy it. And that makes me never mind, but I just don't. I think part of the reason I enjoyed this show is because it is very well designed to have lots of music in it. And a lot of the music is very intricately designed as well, as we're going to talk about in this parlay. To begin to transition to it, we're going to be talking about Yukine Chris a lot. And Chris is kind of a brash, I think the show's kind of punk girl, but her Symphogear is guns, like ranged attacks, crossbows, arbalests, and firearms, cannons. And so, what does she need? Support and cover, and to be in the back and to plan. And what does she not want to do when she first meets the characters? Like any of that, talk at all, basically. And obviously, that's designed from the ground up to be just this interesting thing about her. Tsubasa, who we're also going to talk about, is a traditional Japanese girl to an extent. Is, has studied the blade in her father's dojo and has old Japanese mannerisms and some somewhat old timey and formal speak that you hear in her singing a lot, which is going to be important to the song we're talking about today. It's interesting to see how they planned that out and kind of wove those things together. It's a show that is very well thought through. So even if it's not something that you would like, I think you can rest assured that there is at least like purpose to the way it is that way. It reminds me of playing lots of video games. There are plenty of video games I can think of where there's something really good in the game, but it just is an independently good thing that the game does. The game does this thing really well. It's not really related to the other things, nor does the rest of the game live up to that level of value. And then there are games that are the opposite. The game feels very cohesive, I guess. It knows what it wants to be. Symphogear is the latter type of thing. And personally, I value that very highly because it means that if you enjoy part of it, well, it's all unified in that purpose. And so you'll probably just enjoy all of it, no frills. Warning, there's a lot of fan service in there and big lesbian energy, which is great. And if you're looking for that, that's cool. I just want you to know it's a very fan servicey show. Probably more later as well. I don't really remember. Anyway, a wild and hallucinogenic show that I recommend. I guess, again, I think the main recommendation for me is that because it's a pretty unified in its purpose piece of media, you'll probably know if you're gonna like it once it's done its thing. And if this discussion sounds interesting to you, like it could be really fun. If you like music in your anime, I do think there are some bangers in this show's soundtrack, and having each character have their own aesthetic and way of doing their music, but also how they combine, is just really interesting. So, to wit, Bayonet Charge, link in the description, we're not going to play it during the parlay, is sung by the blue, helpfully color-coded protagonist, Tsubasa, and red protagonist, Chris. It starts with each character singing lines from her partner's theme song, filtered through her own personality and themes. In that way, it's almost as if they're tapping into alternate universe selves. The song opens with the girls' transformation chants, just a line they have to say to initiate their transformation, followed by Tsubasa's take on Chris's Bye Bye Lullaby theme. As a swordswoman, Tsubasa replaces Gatling gun, with sword, and broadly sings in a more formal tone as befits her old-fashioned mindset. Accordingly, her lines are more often accompanied by the sound of a traditional Japanese stringed instrument, while Chris's lines lean more on electric guitar. Another example of the show does that kind of stuff all the time. The relevant lyrics of Chris's song and Tsubasa's take on it are written in color-coded below, with both the English and the Japanese text, which I will attempt to read for you. I included the latter because it shows the differences in their speech registers, which comes up again later. Some of this may challenge my ability to speak good Japanese, but I will try, and I think you will. I think that PistilWhip is correct. I think you'll be able to get the gist of it from just like one or two lines. So, for example, Chris, in the original text of her Bye Bye Lullaby, says, Aisatsu muyo no gaturingu, There's greetings aren't needed for my Gatling. And Tsubasa, when saying it herself, says, Ai satsunado muyo surugi mao zange no jikan. No need for greetings, it's time to repent, dancing with my sword. There's also another interesting Jigoku no soko de enma sama ni dogeza shite koi. It's a death party for your trip to the trash. Come kneel before Yama in the pits of the underworld. The god sort of Shintoism of the underworld in Japanese mythology. Um, and likewise, Tsubasa's more traditional version, Jigoku no Okusoko de Enma Dono ni Hirefuse. Enma Dono, not Enma Sama. Prostrate yourself before Lord Yama in the depths of the underworld. You can see how her tone is different, but the sentiment is the same. She's not being more polite, really. She's being more formal. Like she's saying it in a more religious or Bushido focused way rather than saying, get wrecked or whatever, the way that Chris is. And it's interesting to hear them singing back and forth like this. Incidentally, PistilWhip adds, the line about Enma-sama, Lord Yama, is borrowed from Bye Bye Lullaby's chorus rather than the first verse. Interesting decision. These songs are quite intricately rewritten and play a lot. It's their theme song, so you hear chunks of it multiple times throughout the series of the runtime of the show, which, again, it's 5 seasons, so they have lots of new songs. It's not like the same one every time, but you hear variants of them a lot. And there's a number of these like duet style ones as well. What you'll see if you look at the video in the description is that the person who uploaded this has very helpfully kind of color coded and spotlighted each of the two of them when they're singing or when they're singing together. And that makes it easy to see, oh, this kind of sounds like it would be a line from Chris, but it's Tsubasa singing. And of course, their voice actresses are really different. I think they voice cast Tsubasa very well. She sounds like it's the perfect voice for this, I think. She sounds kind of like a samurai, and she has a like a nice sort of relatively deeper, still very I don't know, like recognizable idol voice, I guess. I believe that Tsubasa's voice actress is actually famous for singing already. Like that's not just the thing she was able to do for this role. Most of the rest of the cast like can sing and was recruited because they can sing, but aren't like working as singers. I believe that's correct. And I feel like you can kind of tell with Tsubasa. And that formalism really helps, right? Like that's her personality. And so you feel that in the music. Chris sounds like a mouthy, punk girl who is singing this idol song, which is great because that's what she is in the plot. I think that's nice. And having it be that most of the cast is not or doesn't sound like they're professional idol singers, personally, I think helps with a series that has a lot of music in it. One of the things that can be about musical theater is it's really difficult to do the thing most musical theater does where you weave the song into the narrative because the people singing don't remotely sound like they could be people that were just in passing in real life. Something I think Symphogear does really well is that most of the cast I think has been voice directed, has been directly told to not try to sound like a professional singer and to just sing. Imagine you're at school, they sing at school, they're, the anthem or, the intro theme or whatever you want to call it for their school that they go to. And they just sing like that. I imagine they were told because that is how nearly everybody sounds. In universe, Tsubasa works as an idol, like sings for a living. As her like day job, I guess, when she's not symphogearing, which is also something where she sings. That's confusing. Anyway, you get the point. And so she sounds like that. And I think that really adds a lot. It really makes it sound like Chris is basically just talking while they're fighting, but it is melodious, rather than it being, this is now full-blown opera, but just a minute ago we were in the newsy office or whatever in some musical. I find that very jarring. I think that Symphogear has a good solution. Anyway, you'll hear that in the song. Sorry for the significant derailment. Moving on, the brash and impatient Chris replaces Tsubasa's moonlit sword, Gekko no Tsurugi, with guns, of course, and she doesn't stop at 2 shots. Chris is best girl, by the way. Also, Bye Bye Lullaby is a downgrade relative to her season 1 theme, Makyu no Ichivo. I agree, personally. PistilWhip, I am a Chris stan, I am a Chris fan, and I really like her initial Ichivo themed theme. I think this is a really good individual song, but if I were to pick any music I wanted to show you from Symphogear, I think I would have made a worse parlay than this because I would have just picked a song I like, but which doesn't show the show's themes as much. I think this is a great example. It is a cool, awesome sounding song, but it demonstrates like the everything being woven together. Anyway, I'll try to give you another example of Chris singing Tsubasa's theme uh, with her own like verbiage. I'm not going to read the whole thing because I'm not that good at it, and I think it doesn't make the point any more than the first time. But I'm just going to show you an example. So rather than singing "Hitotsume no tachi inabikari yori saishoku naru kaze no gotoku," first comes the sword akin to the wind, faster than lightning. Chris simply says, "Hitotsume wa uts, futatsume mo uts." My first shot hits, and so does my second. She just replaces them with gunshots. And it's going to go on to be Tsubasa saying, "Second comes the sword akin to the forest, for nothingness lies within." Very warrior poet type of talking that Tsubasa's character is built around. But Chris just says, "Third, fourth, you're a real pain for our bonds. I'm still shooting you. Power of friendship." After this mixed and matched intro, the two girls come together to say, "Don't underestimate us." Tsubasa again uses the more formal language, "Nameru denai," where Chris uses the harsher namenjanai, excuse me. Skipping ahead to Bayonet Charge's first chorus, I greatly enjoyed the back and forth between Tsubasa and Chris singing about the snow, the wind, the flowers, and all people before they come together and reaffirm their support for each other. By the way, the ship has entered the harbor. Anyway, and as long as we don't forget the dreams we harbor inside, even the snow, Chris chimes in, and as well as the wind, Tsubasa continues, the flowers too, Chris says, and all people, have the courageous hearts to fight and cry in their own invincible colors, "I'll never leave you alone." Again, the ship has pulled into the harbor. Notably, Tsubasa Kazanari's surname is written with wind and Chris Yukine with snow. Thus, when they sing about the courageous hearts of the snow and wind, they are referring once again to the sentiment of mutual support and their ship. Sorry, I'll stop. And indeed, the chorus ends with, "I'll never leave you alone. I guess I'm gonna keep going." Without getting as far into the details, Chris mentions we're kind of clumsy and distant as senior figures in the second verse, to which Tsubasa replies in the following chorus, "The day we'll call each other friends is not far off. Be still my heart." The chorus ends with an explicit invocation of "we'll do our best in colors of our own, too, and say what she said, don't give up on living." Yeah, there's a lot of this and some just straight up talking between the characters that it is kind of common in musical theater. You can hopefully see some more parallels now where a song will pause. Again, I feel in musical theater this is usually more jarring because it was a full-blown like normal song and dance song, not voice acted, if you want to call it that, voice directed, to like not seem like a formal song. But then they'll pause and the characters will briefly comment, usually just a sentence or two exchanged before like the chorus kicks in or something. In musicals, this is often done like between parts of the song. So like between the verse and the chorus, there'll be a sort of unusual bridge segment for a measure or two where the characters just speak to each other in normal English. Again, personally, I find this sort of jarring because it's not designed to feel like the singing would happen in universe. And I'm not just saying that I think immersion is good for its own sake. I just find it to be tonally slightly frustrating. I don't know. Again, it's fine if you enjoy these things. I'm mostly arguing that I just don't like it and this is different, not that this is better. But I do think that in some ways it is a stronger way to have characters like be talking in the world. This show plays it straight. In the world of the show, yeah, it's a little weird that we need to sing while like saving the world from alien invaders, but that's what we have to do. So get serious. Let's do this, and I just personally prefer that. I think it commits more. Again, I think some people that don't enjoy musicals, which sound very similar on the surface, even good musicals, might enjoy this because it is approaching the situation differently. But there is still that element, a good idea in both musicals and this, where the characters just straight up talk like in the middle of the song to each other. Their relationship drama, sung to the world, though I suppose it's mostly the enemies listening, humorously called the noise most of the time. I think that's a really fun, like, basic villain name. As a parting note, PistilWhip concludes, there are plenty more collaborative songs in Symphogear, and the fact that the voice actresses intersperse, for example, dialogue and sounds of exertion or injury into the lyrics as well, really makes the songs feel like part of the world. In fact, Bayonet Charge, the song I've linked, is my second favorite duet up through season 3. The honor of first goes to the totally radical Edge works of Goddess Zababa, yes, it is Zababa, which is first given to the viewer in two separate halves. Yes, really cool. I'll talk about that in a sec. Those who don't have a trained musical ear might not even realize that it's a duet until both halves are played together, which in turn raises some interesting questions about what the song means to each of the two singers. I suppose we could tackle that in a future parlay, but no promises. Entire parlay dedicated to Symphogear ships when? Question mark. I don't know that there's enough time in the world for the things you could say about this show. Indeed, one of the things I think Bayonet Charge was the better choice, but Edgeworks of Goddess Zababa is interesting because we get it presented as each of the two characters that it's going to be a duet between singing their half on their own without the context that they'll be combined together. There's this MacGuffin in Symphogear that each of the characters has like an artifact or whatever, like a symbol of past heroism or gods that is the relic that allows them to like do their powerful thing when they sing. And the singing is sort of attuning to the frequency of the thing. It's been a little while. Sorry if that's just blatantly wrong. If you haven't seen this show, it's basically that. Like that's how it works. So the couple in Edgeworks of Goddess Zababa, and they are pretty explicitly a couple, unlike the other pairings, have like related artifacts, if I recall, and are both kind of connected to the same mythology underlying. So it's interesting how even though they fight really differently, but are really close when, well, even when fighting, but when not fighting, their songs are kind of paired. And if you listen to the songs with, it's interesting what you said, PistilWhip, with a musical ear, I think you would notice that there was sort of a lot of space in this song versus that song. And then when they combine them together, they're interspersed quite cleverly. The songs were clearly designed to be combined together. It doesn't sound like the two are singing over each other. It sounds like they're singing a duet together. It is thus fascinating to hear them sung on their own. They kind of needed to work on their own a little bit too, because that was a big part of the show when these two were introduced. That's very interesting as well, and the type of thing the show does a lot. All the characters kind of combining together or like doing their big chorus as they fight the big bad of the season is a big focus of the show as well. So having room to fiddle with that is neat. I think that having a show like this also where the characters are, we've kind of joked about it a little, like color coded so explicitly. Your blue character, your red character. You've got your yellow character. There's a pink character, there's a green character, and there's another pink character. Well, I guess, no, she's silver, right? Anyway, and so they combine together. But she wears a ton of pink. Anyway, whatever. It is helpful for keeping all this straight. And the characters have very distinct abilities. It's the kind of show that if you're into hard magic, getting explanations of exactly how everything works, you're going to want to know what abilities these things have, and they don't really give that to you that much. It only comes up a little bit, mostly with a really interesting topic we don't have time for, which is Muse. We kind of do have time. Shenshojing, however you pronounce it, has very explicit abilities. And so her music is also like really different and interesting, I think. We kind of do have time. Let's talk about that. Yeah, I mean, one of the fun things this show does too is create mood and expectations through music. So in season 2, there's a significant reveal where a character, a new, rival appears, and she sings a song that sounds a lot like the protagonist's song. And you're just naturally musically keyed in faster than you would be keyed in by most other cues. Wait, this is familiar. It's that thing. Like, I know what this is, sort of. That power of leitmotifs, having like a little string of music that is a certain progression of notes, and then you hear it and your brain goes, ooh, I know what that is used a lot in the show. For drama and the feeling like our protagonist has been usurped or replaced when they can't deliver, and this person is able to sing the song just as well. That's neat in its own way. The characters singing about their values too is a nice way to have it be that it's weird, right? A whole topic I wanted to do is how fight scenes, good fight scenes, are meant to demonstrate character, and what happens when you have fight scenes that demonstrate character. If you remove the music, I think Symphogear follows those rules very well, but then you have the characters sing a song during the fight scene where they tell, not show, but also show at the same time their character growth. What's going on? I argued previously that musicals often are structured in a way, just not as good musicals, where there just is music, but it isn't like in any way a sensible fit for the series. You could argue that an action show, in theory, maybe warrants having the musical numbers in it more, because it would be a way to add characterization to those moments of action instead of them just being a big set piece. The characters have to kind of do something where they express themselves to do the thing in the action set piece. It's not just that the writer designs the show so that it's the script is written so that the action happens when it builds character. That's good, you got to do that. But the show is designed so the characters need to do, like, say out loud things about their feelings to be able to do the action set piece. Sounds like a weird but maybe sort of addressing a problem like thing to do. However, I think Symphogear is already written that way. If you removed the singing, almost all the fight scenes are quite by the book, character building fight scenes. And so are the songs, as we just discussed. The song that we talked about in this parlay is essentially just playing out Chris and Tsubasa working together as a song, the song. Like, that's what it is. If you turned off the audio and watched that chunk of the anime, so is the fight scene. The fight scene is that as well. Again, Chris having a long ranged weapon and being kind of brash and disrespectful initially was obviously built in as a way to make her need to cooperate and be kind of on a trajectory to character growth. And so you don't like need to do the one or the other for that to be the case. But the show does both. Is this double good, double success? I don't know. I personally feel like sometimes Symphogear can be guilty of like melodrama or hitting you over the head with it, where you, but does this need to happen? But I'm about to say, you could do a show that did this in a subtler way. And in some ways, I feel like that would be where the effect of the lyrical crossovers would be the most felt. That you would notice Tsubasa and Chris singing in this way that like has overlap or like taps into each other's themes. If it wasn't already like more obvious than would otherwise be possible that they are tapping into each other's themes. Keeping it as PG as possible here, folks. It's not my fault the show is so fixated on them. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think it makes the show worse. I've been saying that I liked this part of the show, but I do want to say that it's certainly a choice. Like I kind of feel like finding ways to do less with more, or more with less, excuse me, can be good. This show sometimes I feel does do less with more. That was my Freudian slip. When like filler parts of the show can be quite dry, or maybe just feel that way because the action is so dense. You know, we get kind of two layers of show and tell. You're not going to miss the character themes in this show. It's not subtle. If you were thinking, wow, this is getting a little literary interpretation when we were going through the lyrics, yeah, no, I don't think you're going to feel like that when you watch it. It's not subtle, not necessarily in a bad way unsubtle, but like it's obvious usually. I think you will feel that way. So I don't know. I just think it's interesting to have a show that does that well already, where this doesn't really, basically where I'm going with this is solve a problem. The singing is an interesting and very thoroughly incorporated element of the show, but it still doesn't ultimately solve a problem the show would have without it, in my opinion. It's just like a thing the show does that is cool and I think well integrated if you're going to like that. But in theory, personally, I think it is satisfying in a different way when a show is or a piece of media is built so all the pieces like need to be there to do their thing. And there's something special about a piece of media that is bare bones except for what needs to be there, giving those things the full focus. Now, again, in Symphogear, I'm tempted to argue it's no big deal because I think that the songs are often bangers and the action scenes are awesome, like usually extremely cool, and a lot of fun. And so I don't really feel like the show is guilty of taking the focus off the good stuff and putting it on like a greater variety of elements. The two elements that are competing for attention are both awesome parts of the show. So like, does it matter? I guess. I just think it's interesting. I would wonder if somebody were to watch this, if people have opinions of their own about, like, is that too much though? Is there something negative there? There's a part of the artist of me that is just arguing for inelegance, but there's no consequence, and both of the parts are really cool. And like, it is often pretty elegant. It is incorporated in this elegant way. But I'm just saying I don't think that it is in some ways a completely crucial part of the show, despite being such an overarching and built-in part of the show, which is just kind of interesting. You could further ask the question, and we won't. I'll talk about my Miu point for the end of the parlay. But you could further ask the question if you were to go on that topic more, like when music in a piece of theater or anime or entertainment in general is like necessary for the thing to be happening. You could argue that in musicals, well, that is the thing that's happening on screen. It's this anime that is the weirdo, where there's a fight scene that already tells the story of the characters happening, but then also there's a song that also tells the story of the characters also happening. And what does that do? I will just say I hope some people that are interested in that try for themselves. Again, it's like pretty fan servicey, so that's just a warning. But I feel the show is also quite on task. There's we have a whole other parlay also about fan service being distracting, but I think the way this show is not guilty is simply that it doesn't drag its feet, in my opinion. It's not like caught up in just that. It's quite on task, I guess is the way I would say it. And there's just also fan service during that part. These characters, I think, pretty obviously outwardly like each other a lot too, and so like, okay, I guess there would be some fan service. However, also the first season has kind of a in animation quality. I don't think that it gets in the way enough of what the series gets right that it is going to put most people off. You just might want to note, if you were on the edge of enjoying the show, that it is going to improve in quality noticeably, just visually, as it goes on. I don't feel that the like script writing or singing or structure of the show like is that bad early or really changes in quality that much, but certainly visually I felt like it got a step up later on. No notes about that anymore. Miu situation. Yes. Hibiki, our protagonist, or our main protagonist, has a friend at school who doesn't have Symphogear abilities, named Miu. It is Miu, right? I'm not losing my head about this. And she has an interesting like fate in the plot that I'm Miku, excuse me, not Miu. I got confused with the preponderance of Mius in fiction. It's Miku, Kohinata Miku. Um, and I'm going to try to cover up spoilers for what goes on with Miku, but suffice it to say, she gets a song. Well, at least one. And it's really interesting. It is her thing she gets, to avoid the spoiler as much as possible, is different than a lot of the other characters and under a different context. And the mood of the song is really different. Like, I feel like the genre, I guess, of the song is not very related to the rest of the music in the series. One of the just fascinating things about something like Symphogear is that it's music from these characters that is meant to make them feel different and distinct from each other. So they're not like the exact same musicality or genre, if you will. But a lot of them like kind of are, though. Giving Tsubasa and Chris as an example, I mean, Tsubasa's music is pretty related to hard rock music, but it just uses some sounds that the listener might associate with Japanese culture more traditionally. Whereas Chris has music that is also hard rocky, but uses like crunchy, recognizable electric guitar from like the Western rock scene. Not all the characters have music that is like so specifically instrumentalized for them, but most of the music in the show is like that genre. Miku's thing, however, is not, in my opinion. It's kind of a melancholy, a chilled out electronic thing. It's a little bit spooky, and that change in tone is also a change in her abilities because it's this show. That's how that works. Most of them are like one woman army abilities, and Miku's isn't an ability like that, and so her song doesn't sound like that, which I think is very interesting. I think it's cool to be able to expect what the character will be like from their music and kind of know something is off that way. I said earlier that if you're a person who enjoys the hard magic explanations of how abilities work or powers work, this show doesn't really do that. But an interesting way in which it does, and the reason I bring up Miku briefly, is that the music kind of does that to an extent. You feel in the rhythm of the music and the voice actresses literally reacting as they're fighting while singing something about the way that the characters work and operate and their capabilities. And that's an interesting way to do it, isn't it? I always use for soft and hard magic, maybe a weird concept to have brought up in this parlay, but it's a weird parlay to begin with. I don't know, I think it makes sense and is relevant here. I always like to bring up the example of soft magic in, let's say, Lord of the Rings. Why can Gandalf prevent the Balrog from chasing the hobbits at that particular spot? You could say lots of things. I mean, he's like ordained by the whatever they're called, the angel people, God, to be able to intervene. I guess that's why he can come back, I suppose. It's a barrier, you know? It's dramatically interesting for him to be able to stop the Balrog in a large dramatic gap. You could say the magic comes from being in a barrier or a gateway. It makes some intuitive, soft magic kind of sense that if something is trying to pass through an area, it's easier to stop the thing from passing through the area at the borders of that area, not some arbitrary spot in the middle, maybe. Why, in terms of hard magic, is that easier? I don't know. You could make an explanation that has something to do with like the intent of the doorway gives the thing power. But that's just Brandon Sanderson. And I feel in the soft magic explanation, it's like that it is a passageway, it is a portal, it is a boundary between spaces. So that is why it feels dramatically relevant for that to happen. Even if the magic system in the world, in this case, doesn't particularly care about that, which I don't think it does. I'm not a Tolkien scholar, but I don't believe that like is why in universe. I'm just saying soft magic often preys on what we expect to be the case. If you do a lot of magic, that it kind of feels like that should be tiring in some way. For example, even if there is no explicit mana or we don't hear about the source of the energy, the midi-chlorians in Star Wars are a funny example because that's mostly a soft magic system otherwise. We get this idea that you can't just use force abilities or Gandalf firework cannon out of his wand constantly. There's some limit to that. There isn't always, but have this intuitive idea, right? Hard magic, on the other hand, you're explaining exactly why these things work. Well, my point is that I think in both cases, it doesn't have to be the actual explanation. It just has to feel like there are limits to what the characters can and can't do. And a thing I really liked about Symphogear's music is that by giving each character their own thing, it kind of gave us this feeling like, okay, well, it's only natural that they have their lane, basically. Like each character is going to be able to do their things, and they can't just do what the other characters can do. Gestures vaguely because they're a unique person, because their phonic gain from their song doesn't sound the same, or something whatever the show's actual explanation is. I mean, their artifact has specific powers. I don't know. They don't get into it in the show. I would argue that the music vaguely gestures at those limitations and kind of helps a little bit. In a soft magic story, you don't just break any rule. The author just does magic whatever they want. To write effective soft magic, you often have to do something to the effect of proving to the reader that you will not just handwave everything and that things will have limits. And it's the same thing here. If you're going to have something that's the power of friendship, they sing and something something, they gain the ability to punch God, like there have to be some limitations or parameters to that. And I think Symphogear does a good job with this. And partly it's just having a broad cast with lots of different abilities and sounds to their voices and musicality and weapons. Lots of really interesting weapon designs. that's just cool. And I think it does a very good job of making it feel like there are boundaries, there are rules, there's structure, even though there it mostly isn't presented as much of a hard magic system. I would argue it's pretty soft. It's on that end of the spectrum. Which it's not like that's inherently good or bad. I'm just saying like that could leave it open, like in many anime, to if you believe literally anything is possible. And so the moment the characters unite, they're gonna overcome the difficulty ahead of them. But Symphogear can feel a little technical. Another really fun part of the show that has nothing to do with this parlay is how the magical girl transformations, if you can call them that, are like mecha transformations as well. And you get that satisfying kinesthetic look of all the pieces locking into place on their outfits, but also their weapons. That's just cool and an interesting part of the show's aesthetic to me. And I think belies a slightly more technical side to the show that we don't get as like the rules of their powers, but we get as the show's structure, the way the show is constructed. I just think that's cool. I waffled on enough about my weird theory about the variety of ways they sing being like a way to differentiate and ground their abilities. And I think that Miku's song, when it eventually comes up, is a nice sort of capstone on that, that we hear, oh, she doesn't really have the same thing. Therefore, the song is just sort of apart in a way. And since it was sort of lonely and melancholy and a bit creepy. And I really like it. That's one of my favorite songs from the show. But I like the rest of the show's music a lot as well. What a fun parlay to do. So yeah, in summary, I thought this was an interesting one to compare to. I use musicals as a lot of example. I think you gave us a particularly good specimen among the catalog of music in the show of characters doing a duet together and borrowing from each other's music, but still translating it into their own like way of expressing the ideas, literally just changing words that are not their weapon into their weapon, or speaking in a different way and having a different attitude, though no two characters do that as differently as Tsubasa and Chris. So in a sense, I feel like that is uncommon. This is an especially good example, but it doesn't happen like all the time. But it was awesome. Again, I would have picked a indulgent and therefore I think worse example if I were to do this. So it was really cool. Good job. I thought this would have been a challenging one to make, but I thought it was a lot of fun to do. Folks, if you'd like to get your own parlay like this, you can do that using a link in the description. Hopefully these types of parlay give you the idea that it can be about literally anything. You got a bingo card you're keeping for 2025? Yeah, mine is just on fire now. Symphogear parlays, the level of ascendancy that we've acquired. I'm going to continue cultivating until I reach the 5th dragon tier or whatever. And this is the kind of parlay that you can expect a lot of the time. But there are lots of different ones that are more simple, more open-ended prompts, or like a straightforward essay that I respond to. Not always this off-the-wall, I think you knew that I knew of this before you requested it, but I would be even more interesting if I had not heard of this before, right? Anyway, you can request whatever you want. Looking forward to it, and looking forward to the next one.